Thank you, sir. I feel like I'm at a minor league baseball game. That's kind of funny. T-shirt cannon. What I want to talk about is some lessons we've learned at Forward about how to bring together a Washington operation and a tech operation. So I've called this full stack advocacy, coders and lobbyists, people that you might not normally think of coming together. Just very quickly, my background, I consider myself first and foremost a community organizer. Had the chance to study with Marshall Gans, who some of you probably know. Ended up in tech totally by accident. In 2003, I saw Friendster and had sort of a transcendent moment. I don't know if anyone else had a transcendent moment with Friendster. But organizing is, goes back to Moses, and it's always funnily been about relationships. You move people from motivation to action because of the relationships with each other. And when I saw Friendster, I was like, oh my God, if everybody was on Friendster, my life would be a lot easier. And so that led me to start a company called eAssembly, which I actually talked about here, not in this room, but at PDF in 2006. It was a much smaller room at the time. And it's really great to be back and to be here with Mika and Andrew. So then we turned that into Causes, and then I co-founded Nation Builder. And these were both our companies that are fundamentally about bringing together a sort of new world of online social networking with activism, trying to build it on kind of the tried and true principles of activism. And so what we've tried to do with Forward is to bring these things together and actually try to pass legislation. And so we started Forward at the beginning of last year. Very quickly, our mission is to engage the tech community, advocate for policies that will make the American dream achievable in the 21st century. I think as we transition to a knowledge-based economy, a lot of people are being left behind, and I think it's very important that the tech community engage. And so our first thing that we've decided to work on is immigration reform, and we measure our success by the passing of legislation. It's pretty binary. We support full immigration reform, which includes fixing our legal immigration system, fixing enforcement, and a pathway to citizenship for the 11 million undocumented, which we really see as one of the great civil rights issues of our time. So the way we approach this, kind of the puzzle that we're trying to solve, is that this is fundamentally a political challenge. So the last time there was major immigration reform was in 1986. I was 3 years old. It's been a really long time. This is an issue that comes up every 5 or 7 years in Congress. It seems to have a lot of bipartisan support and then seems to fall apart at the last minute. Unlike a lot of issues, there is actually a lot of bipartisan kind of policy consensus. I would say you probably only have 30 or 40 members of the House and probably 5 members of the Senate or so who actually want to deport 11 million people. Everybody else fundamentally understands it is both wrong morally, wrong economically, and completely impractical to deport 11 million people, and so we should find a way to bring them into society. The challenge is the politics of it. And specifically the reason it's challenging is, so depending on the polling, somewhere between 70 to 80% of Americans support immigration reform. The problem is it's like number 6 on their list. And so what that leads to is the 15 or 20% of people who are anti-immigration who tend to cluster in Republican congressional districts. And the output of that is that what congressmen hear is very negative from their constituents. So what we've been told from congressional offices, there's a 6-to-1 ratio of anti-immigration calls to positive immigration calls. So this is sort of like the problem that we're trying to solve, which is how do you create a political moment that enables us to pass reform? So we have tried to take an approach of looking pragmatically at Washington. We do not believe that we are going to fundamentally change Washington overnight. So we try to have a pragmatic assessment of how Washington works and try to then apply innovative solutions with technology. And so we have a sort of full stack organization, lobbying, communications and polling, paid media, grassroots. We do grassroots organizing in the tech community, but we also fund organizing of evangelicals and farm workers and owners of farms, and really trying to create pressure from the top and from the bottom. So we have chosen to invest in an in-house engineering team, an in-house advocacy team. We've built a number of tools, which you can check out on our site. You guys should try one of our fun ones is Selfies for Reform. You can take a selfie and it will actually send that to your member of Congress with a message you write about why you care about immigration. You should try it. It's in the App Store. So I want to talk about, this is one of our products called Push for Reform. This actually came out of a hackathon we did with Dreamers, who are undocumented immigrants who came over as kids. And And we've created this unifying metric, which our entire organization is based around, which we call advocacy points. And so this product got built at this hackathon, and it kind of freaked out our Washington team, because it was a product that said, here's a profile of every member of Congress, and we're going to give them an A through F rating. And everyone's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. There's a lot of members of Congress that are with us, but they're quietly with us, and we don't want to back them into a corner. So I said, okay, DC guys, give us a heuristic that works for DC, but also helps our supporters actually understand what's going on. So they came back with this ladder of different public statements and whether people were yes, no, or unclear on different pieces of reform. And then our group of coding volunteers said, well, we want to create a point system because we want to know which of these actions are most valuable. You know, a letter is probably not worth the same as a tweet. So I went back to our DC team and said, okay, let's come up with this point system. And they said, well, I don't know if you can really value these things. I said, well, we need to do that. We didn't, you know, out in our like Silicon Valley team, we didn't say, we know how much a congressman values a letter versus a tweet versus a phone call. You tell us, and then we will try to drive that activity. And so everything we do, from in-person meetings with members of Congress, with 1,000 points down to signing a petition, we've built what I believe to be the first tool where you can type a letter online and we will physically mail it, because we know that members of Congress weight letters more heavily than they do emails. Is it logical that they weight letters more than emails? I don't know, but that's what they do. We're not going to change that overnight, so we want to adapt to it. So this has enabled us to have a field team of 30 people in-house that are tech community organizers, and then a number of field teams that are contractors and other organizations. We have an in-house engineering team and digital, and all of that activity goes into a single advocacy database, which we then push into Nation Builder. And this, again, has enabled us to really properly direct our efforts. So if you're a member of our field team and our digital team, you're both working towards the same goal, which is generating communications with members of Congress. And I think it's really important to have that metric, because it's important that your volunteers understand why, you know, how they move the needle. And this is harder than I think it is on like a sort of electoral campaign. When you work for a candidate, which I've done a number of times, you have a vocal, you know how many votes you need, and you have an end date, which is the election, and everybody's working towards that goal. Advocacy is much more opaque, right? At the end of the day, we're not trying to convince voters. We're trying to convince 535 people that voters think a certain thing, and that's a combination of perception and reality. And so, and we, you know, no congressman's ever going to raise their hand and be like, you know what, I wasn't going to do this, but because I got pressured into it, now I'm doing it. So we don't, but we can get the feedback mechanism from our lobbying team, who can say, hey, we've been told that this member of Congress's office, they're noticing that suddenly they're getting a lot more letters and a lot more phone calls in favor of reform. So the feedback loop is not perfect, but having that kind of full stack team enables us to have a feedback loop, which I think we could not do. And, you know, and this comes from someone who's spent my entire career building digital tools. And I had gotten to a point where I was somewhat frustrated. I felt like, you know, were we really moving the needle legislatively? And I thought, okay, if we could actually try to bring this stuff together, maybe we could both move legislation and also learn a lot in the process. And so I also consider this like really a learning experience. So another thing I want to dive into a little bit is the way we use online ads. And admittedly, Mark Zuckerberg is our largest funder, but I'm not saying this because of that. Facebook ads have been very useful for us. We are trying to target people in certain congressional districts, and so being able to target by location and also by certain keywords that kind of help us understand. So we use both custom and lookalike audiences, and that lets us create really good targeting for advocacy efforts. And so you can see our ads here to call your member of Congress, send your member of Congress a letter. And one of the cool things is we're able to generate calls, letters, and our selfies for the same cost as normal email acquisition. So we're getting an email address and generating the activity. We're able to generate a letter to Congress at about 10% of the cost of what you would pay kind of an old school letter writing service. And so this has enabled us to drastically bring down the cost and therefore increase the volume of the amount of advocacy we're doing. So here's some of the results that we've found. 76% of the people who use our call tool actually connect with a member of Congress. We make sure that we send those communications during certain hours when congressional offices are actually open. Seems simple, but something we were totally screwing up at the beginning. We've had 250,000 unique people that have taken advocacy action through these tools that we've built. And we've generated 1.2 million advocacy points. This is the first time I'm sharing a bunch of these numbers. The advocacy points have only been going since the beginning of this year. So we've been around a year and a half, but they've only been going since the beginning of 2014. And you can see on the right, the different channels, email is still king. I think people know that. Within social, for driving action, Facebook is like orders of magnitude better than Twitter. Twitter's great for kind of pushing message, but we have not been able to effectively use Twitter to actually push advocacy. And online ads is 10%. So we've really been able to, you will do a lot of this, which is unpaid, or which is our email list. And so it was sort of organic traffic. So here's some kind of final lessons. I think it's really useful to have a single metric. This is like a just obvious business practice, but it took us a lot of work to get there. It's not our only metric, but it's something that enables us to actually have a field team and a digital team that work together. When people get a certain amount of activity online, those leads automatically get passed to our digital team. We score people at 4 levels. And once they reach above a certain level, we're like, okay, this person is worth having a one-on-one relationship with our field team. And that's the second sort of, that enables us to integrate online and offline organizing. We spent a lot of investment in building our own database. That then feeds into Nation Builder, but having that database lets us keep everything in real time between all these different systems, not just in-house, but we're using a variety of kind of grassroots firms that go out into different places, and we've been able to get that all ingested into a single system. And online ads have worked really, really well for us, and there's a lot of cool stuff you can experiment with. We've been experimenting with Facebook has some mobile ads that will let you make a phone call right from the ad. That's been super effective. And so I think that, it's interesting, like these two worlds there's a similar culture in DC and Silicon Valley, which is, they're both actually very purpose-driven places. But I think the biggest difference is Silicon Valley, you start with the question of why not, and DC, you start with the question of why. And that's not because, like, DC's bad people, it's because you inherently have constraints, right? If you want to fix immigration reform, Congress is your only option, right? If you want to go around the taxis, you can create Uber, you can create Lyft, but we have to go through Congress. And just final thing is I just wanted to show is, we just launched Immigrant Heritage Month. We just launched an awesome campaign for people to change their profile picture to the year their family came to America. Mine was 1891. My great-great-grandfather, Joseph Goldman. So encourage people to check that out. We're also hiring. If there are awesome digital organizers out there, we're continuing to build our digital organizing team. So thank you, everybody, for having me. I really appreciate it.